The first question I always get asked, like when I talk about this character on Discord and stuff like that, people always say, does that mean she power creeps Silverwolf? Is Silverwolf useless? Because Silverwolf is known for her ability to drop in weaknesses, and Xueyi kind of like bypasses all of that. The straight answer to you is no, they work excellently well with each other. Because she drops weaknesses to the enemy, she can break it. She gets that quantum rest shred from Silverwolf as well. Super good together. And I do not think that Xueyi power creeps Silverwolf or makes her redundant. But I think the key fear here and why people are feeling that way is it gives the question mark of whether Hoyoverse will continue to increase the number of like colorless breaking characters in future. And that is the thing that really strikes at Silverwolf, because the more characters you have like that in game, in future speculations, the less useful she may become, because it does compete in her space. But for her case specifically, because she's quantum, it doesn't compete, and I think that's why they also made her quantum, so that people don't like have this fear of like, because you pulled Silverwolf and then now that she's out and she gets weaker. That is my opinion why they made her this way, one of the things that they are considering too. So first thing, synergy. I think she works insanely well with Silverwolf or without Silverwolf, regardless of what you choose. And I think she works well with a character, for example, like Ruanmei. If you're playing her, Ruanmei plays around weakness break efficiency. She increases the weakness break, but we'll talk about her in a little bit because this is going to be a mono quantum team that we want to try to talk about. So in pre-pivot as well as utility, I know some of you might not have Zealer, so I would try to like resist the urge to talk about her. I think a pretty nice character for utility slot is anything that is a sustained character, which is probably Fucc or Lynx, depending on which one you have. For the most part, in easier content, I think both of them will be enough to solo sustain. If you face like super difficult content, maybe you want to do something like that, but it's a bit inefficient. You can do with a lot of other stuff. But still, this is a really good option since you can choose. And the best part about being quantum is you get to like decide what you want here. Do you want, for example, Qingque here? If you have her, you can use her as an erudition character. If not, you can play Zealer here, which is also super good. And I think eventually when we have Sparkle, there's also a harmony option that you can put in your pivot slot. The team comps for her is quite flexible, but Mono Quantum, in my opinion, is just like a small little drop in her arsenal. It's just the easiest thing to talk about first because she's of quantum element, but I think it doesn't utilize her full kit in totality, and that is what we want to talk about next, which is flexible sub-DPS. Now, what do I mean by flexible sub-DPS? Now, even though she's quantum element and she works decently well as a main DPS type character, she actually excels in a secondary supportive role where you don't care about her element. Her colorless breaking is basically offering you a hitch to the ups and downs of the memory of chaos. If you have a cycle now that is like full of erudition beneficiary characters that maybe is physical weakness, she's going to play into that too because she's colorless break. She's able to contribute a bit with a bit of splash damage and single target damage, so she's not going to be irrelevant in totality. If, for example, the meta shifts now that all your physical stack characters are built, but suddenly they change it to a fire kind of game, then she's still going to be relevant because she still does colorless break and good amounts of follow-up attack damage as long as you're hitting the enemy weaknesses. Also, she does a bit of splash and good amounts of single target damage, which means that she is a hitch to multiple enemies, single target enemies, whatever element it might be. She will always find a sort of a place here and there. And I always talk about it like for us old timers who joined on the first day, it's really like how we felt Dan Heng was. He's not the best character in the game by no means, but building him meant that you could save a lot of your resources to pull later characters, and you didn't really need like the wind element to address a lot of things, especially once you got like Sampo going for your Kafka teams, once you got Blade going, then wind kind of like becomes not very important, he drops off. Xueyi is going to feel like that to a lot of newer players, just that she lives on longer and longer, especially you can just switch her out to tackle other kind of elemental comps. So a big lead in, but pretty much that already summarizes this flexible sub-DPS role. The synergy here is pretty much determined based on what are you looking for in the memory of chaos. I can fit in any DPS here, but for the sake of this video and not like flooding this thing here, I'm just going to put in, for example, like a couple of elemental DPS. Like for example, you have physical here, you have maybe, for example, here you have ice, you have, let's put in even, for example, a wind type here. So any DPS of any element, and for all of those of you who are just watching, I just want you to know this is not the best characters for her. I just want you to know that it's an elemental synergy that I'm talking about. Your pivot here really can be most other characters in the game that you are mainly buffing, like for example, this slot here, your synergy slot. For example, maybe you're hyper carrying with a Tingyun to buff them, or if you're playing Huo Huo to buff everyone else, I think it's also pretty solid. Or even, for example, a Runmei here. Anyone who's buffing the main DPS and maybe a little bit splashes over in terms of energy and some sort of attack buffing to her will work really well. And utility is just any sustain unit here you can think of that supplements your entire roster as well. She works super well with most characters in the game, and that is why I think Xueyi is super versatile to use. Next, the FUA teams, which basically stands for, it's an acronym for follow-up attacks, in case any of you don't know. The best synergy she has here, of course, with a follow-up support unit like Topaz. Topaz is going to be super good for her because she gets buffed every time there's a follow-up attacks, and follow-up attack damage increases too. In future, if we have like a follow-up attack buffer and stuff, specific Harmony character to buff follow-up attacks, I think that would be really interesting to work well with her. But for now, I do see a synergy between these two. She's more single target. Xueyi here is a little bit more splash oriented, colorless, which means that you can play into like a fire comp with her, or you can play into like some other element. She still does good amounts of quantum, so she fulfills quantum here, you have fire here, and you have a bit of colorless breaking wherever you need, and your pivot and utility you can fit in. Most people will probably play a Harmony character. If you are, let's say, pulling for a first time, you will probably play something like this. For maybe your a bit more break oriented teams, because follow-up attackers do quite a lot of break damage since they attack so often as well. Probably a character like Runmei will work really well. If not, Tingyun, who is on the current banner, will also work excellently well. Any other Harmony unit, like for example Asta and pretty much most of these units can fit here. Your utility again is sustain, but this is a category that I want to explore again once we have more follow-up attackers in future, especially coming back. For example, maybe you can have like Clara in this like utility slot or pivot slot here as well, because she also does like some sort of follow-up attacks with her counter ability, provide some sort of AoE splash from the physical element. In future, I want to revisit this, but this is another team comp that she can play in, which I think is also, speaking of how versatile the character is. Last but not least, which is pretty much the main important gist of this whole entire video, is talking about the free-to-play teams. I don't mean free-to-play by meaning that you are lucky or unlucky. I mean having comps that are totally like no limited 5 stars, and we will talk about some of the banner characters to add into the mix for any of you new players here. So really think of this as a new player section, and any of you experienced players, at this point you're like, I'm an experienced player, I don't need to know any of these, man. Do leave a comment or look at some of the comments below, because a lot of new players will be referring to 4-star videos, and we will appreciate if you guys can help contribute and help the newer players, like how everyone helped each other out when we first started the game too. It's very daunting, especially when you are entering a game of being of such a mature community, and we just want to be more inclusive as a whole. So free-to-play teams. For any of you new players, I think that this is an excellent banner to start pulling on, because you get excellent units like Tingyun and Runmei who will solidify any roster, or even Blade, for example. If you wanted to add in a bit of DPS, you can go either way. Whether you're looking for the more DPS route, you choose Blade. You want more longevity and more security in the support section, you go for Runmei. Both have its merits for a new player, but the one constant in both of them is you have Tingyun here, but I won't talk about her in this first part because I just want to help you build a free-to-play team totally with free units in entirety. So definitely, I think utility, you can start off with Natasha here in the last slot. She'll be definitely pretty solid as well. And in my opinion, like pivot synergy here, you could of course run Asta here to get you a bit of attack buffing, a bit of speed buffing, because more speed means more energy restoration for her, which she will like a lot. She acts more often. Your teammates have a lot more break on the enemy, which is nice because Asta actually deals quite a bit of fire break damage in terms of to the enemy toughness if they have fire weakness. So it does combo with her quite nicely as well, especially if they're multi-hit. Which is pretty effective. And synergy here, I think I will look for a single target damage dealer or an AoE damage dealer. Instinctively, like out of the top of my head, I feel that Serval might be an interesting pick to pair with Xueyi, because Serval also does quite a lot of break damage. She covers the lightning element. So with this, you have like 3 different elements with a bit of physical here and a colorless breaker. You can pretty much tackle like most early game content if you are a very new player, and you have a team of waifus over here for you to choose from. So it's really amazing, and it scales on also, because these two are pretty much like staple supports until you get the other more niche or better, so to speak, abundance characters, harmony characters, but you'll settle like one of your teams more or less. Serval here might fall off a little bit, especially if you get more characters, but she bursts very often still, and lightning will always be like more or less in check if you have her in, if you don't plan like pull on Kafka later on and stuff. So that is my thoughts of the first side. Where I want to really add value will probably be if you pull Tingyun here. I think Tingyun works excellent in the pivot slot to buff a character, for example, like Xueyi. She needs the attack, she likes the attack, she likes the energy, she can do more colorless breaking. If you're looking for an early game hyper carry kind of DPS, super good Tingyun here. And for example, if you are playing with Ronmei here, which I don't think you want to like hyper carry her, you could always play her up in the second team and you'll be getting Doctor Ratio later on in the second half. You want to like make your team like that. And then you have this like here, because she does benefit quite a bit from Tingyun as well. She benefits from both of them, like Xueyi, Tingyun and Ronmei both benefit Xueyi. But I think that Tingyun's energy does do a lot better for her, and you can always run like a second DPS in the synergy slot if you really wanted to, or however you feel like mixing up. These two can be exchanged up depending on what the comms are requiring, and that is a comm that I will build if you are pulling for Ronmei. If you're going for a character, for example like Blade, I think Blade will work really well as even together with Xueyi, because he is like doesn't take up too much skill points. He just needs some sort of sustain in his team. If you have Natasha, he works well for now, and later on once you have Lynx, he works super well with Lynx, and he will be taking out a lot of damage. That means your Xueyi can be left to like do her secondary DPS things, as we talked about in the other video, and you can have like Doctor Ratio in the second half with maybe other characters. For example, you can have your Esther buffing that team, or maybe you can put Yukong there and stuff like that. We'll talk about them in other videos that you might be interested in on the different characters and Doctor Ratios one. But anyways, I hope that you guys found this general video very helpful. Do like and subscribe for more such future videos. We do this every single patch. And again, thank you so much for watching. Check out these two videos, which I think is very useful. And especially this one here about Xueyi, I think you might be interested in as well. Why I think she's an excellent unit. And thank you guys so much for watching. See you next video.